Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Kim Scott wants to show us how to be a great boss without losing our humanity. Kim, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Kim, your book, Radical Candor, you begin by talking about a terrible boss you had. I mean, the very first paragraph you start off.
Yeah.
Is that something good for all of us to look at, to look back at, like the bosses we've had or the people who have been over us, so to speak, and kind of analyze those mistakes? Do you recommend that to people?
I think it's a great idea, especially if you're becoming a new manager, to think about both the worst boss you ever had, to good examples of stuff you do not want to do, but also think about some of the best bosses you ever had. I think stories are really helpful to sort of bring the humanity of the whole relationship, and imagine that the people who are working for you probably feel the similar things that you felt with various bosses you've had.
Now, as a result of that, you got away from that boss, and you started your own business, but you said you actually made other mistakes. And, of course, I think that's very confident of you to come out and say something like that, because it's easy to be the master and tell us what to do. But you're saying, hey, I made mistakes too. And you talk about one particularly made with a worker, Bob. Could you tell us about that and why you consider that a mistake?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bad boss that I had, I was trying not to be like, he was a total jerk.
Yes, I read that part of it.
Yeah, he was belittling. In fact, he was so belittling that my doctor couldn't believe it, but I literally shrunk half an inch while working for him. So I was determined not to be like that. And unfortunately, I veered in another direction that was really maybe even worse. So Bob was this guy who worked for me. I really liked Bob. He was charming. He was funny. He would do stuff like we were at a management offsite, and we were playing one of those get to know you games. And it was one of those games that goes on and on and on, and everybody hates it, but nobody will admit that they hate it. And finally, Bob said, "I've got a really good idea. It'll be super fast. Let's just go around the table and confess what candy our parents used when potty training us. Weird, but fast." Even weirder, everybody remembered. And then for the next 10 months, every time there was a tense moment in a meeting, Bob would whip out just the right piece of candy for the right person at the right moment. So anyway, I found this funny. I liked Bob. One big problem with Bob, he was doing absolutely terrible work. And because I liked him, I didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I didn't tell him, and I didn't tell him, and I didn't tell him. And over the course of 10 months, the inevitable happened, and I realized that I was being totally unfair to the rest of the team, people who were doing great work, and also really unfair to Bob. And now, because I'd been trying to be so nice to Bob, I'm in a situation where I have to fire him, having never told him what he was doing wrong, right? Not so nice after all. And when I had the conversation with Bob, when I finished, he sort of pushed his chair back from the table. He looked at me right, in the eye, and he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And as that question is going around in my head with no very good answer, he said to me, "Why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared about me."
You know, I've always felt that way about... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I always felt that way with bosses sometimes I've been on the subordinate end, sometimes on the upper end. And I would say to people, if you don't tell an employee when they're doing something, how do they know you're dissatisfied? And I think it's a disservice, especially if it's a mismatch. If sometime you can see right away, this isn't going to connect, to keep them there for 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months or longer, because the boss doesn't stand up and simply say to the person, look, here's the things you're doing incorrectly. Either you're going to have to correct them or, this isn't going to work out, or giving them either direction or a hint or something, just as Bob said, that this isn't clicking and we're really not satisfied. Maybe they just don't catch on to your body language that this isn't working. And I do think that's a disservice to the employee, and I think I would probably be in Bob's shoes.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. It's a terrible disservice to the employee and unfair to the rest of the team as well, because they're working hard, they're doing great work, and now they're having to carry this other person who's not doing good work. So for a bunch of reasons, not only for Bob's sake, because if I had told him what he was doing wrong, maybe he would have fixed it. The problem, in fact, I learned later, which probably explained all that candy, was that he was smoking pot in the bathroom every day. So if he had known that this was impacting his work, maybe he would have stopped. Maybe he would have fixed it. I don't know. Because I never asked him for feedback. I never gave him the feedback, and I realized in that moment it was too late for me to save Bob. All I could do was make a very solemn promise to myself that I would never make that mistake again. And that's really why I wrote the book, Radical Candor, and why I started the company, Candor Inc., to build an app that'll help people be better managers.
Well, now let's mention that to our audience. If they tuned in late or didn't hear it at the beginning, the book is Radical Candor, Candor, by our guest, Kim Scott. Kim, where is this book available? Where can we get it?
This book is available wherever you buy books. So you can get it at your local independent bookstore. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. There's a bunch of bulk book buying companies. If you go to our website, radicalcandor.com, you'll be able to see all the places where you can buy the book.
And is there a website we should know about?
Yes, the website is radicalcandor.com.
And I will tell people, like most of our guests on the show, Kim has written a book, very easy to read, a lot of anecdotes, fun reads, but you can read and say, wait, that's me. That's my company. That's what I did. That's what my boss did. That's what Shirley did. And it's going to make you that much of a better leader when you're doing it. And also, as you start to say things like this, people are going to say, how did you get so smart? How come you're alert to this? Because this is going on in their mind. So if you're looking to move up the ladder, get a promotion, maybe you're not looking to be the CEO, but you just want to move up a few levels, a great book, Radical Candor, and you're going to hear some of the fun stories that Kim speaks about. Now, Kim, you turned things around completely when you went to, was it Google? I think am I correct? You actually had your employees evaluate you?
Yes, absolutely. When I was interviewing for the job at Google, I interviewed with a lot of the people who were going to be on my team. It was very important. Google went to great lengths to make sure that to the maximum extent possible, they took hierarchy out of the management equation. And being a boss was really just a job. It was not a value judgment or anything like that. And that was a really good sign to me about the culture at Google, that I was supposed to offer a service to the people who were working for me, and they got to decide whether or not I got hired.
Were there any interesting evaluations that came back? Did they find that your perfume was too strong, or maybe they didn't like what you ate for lunch?
No, they they actually had really insightful things to say. In fact, years later, when I was interviewing for another job after I had left Google, somebody asked me, who did you learn the best lessons of management from? And they were expecting some famous person. And I said, I learned all my best lessons from the people who worked for me. The team of people that I got to work with at Google was amazing, and they taught me an awful lot.
It sounds like you're a great communicator and also a great listener and someone who picks up from what's going on around them, which, again, that's what we all hope our bosses are doing, and makes for a better workplace, and I think makes all of us work a lot harder. Now,
well, it's interesting. I learned a lot about listening when I was at Google because people thought I was not a good listener. And I got some feedback about that, about how to make sure that people saw that I was listening. I was, I think, listening, but I'm what I call in the book a loud listener. And sometimes that doesn't get perceived as listening. So I learned how to modulate there.
But to your credit, and someone who was very brave about it, I think, you're telling us all these things that you were willing to learn, and not to say, well, I'm the boss. Hey, you do it my way. You learn, subordinate, not me. But you turn the game around, and I think that really puts a lot of credit in your sphere, and also why you're such a good boss, and you're the person writing the book.
Well, thank you. It also took a lot of courage from the people who were working for me, because, of course, it's hard to give your boss feedback, and they were willing to do it, so I'm very grateful to them.
Kim, you mentioned, I think it's on page 6 of your book, you talk about that managers have 3 areas of responsibility.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that and why you break it down to 3?
Absolutely. The 3 things that you are responsible for as a manager are, first of all, what I call in the book guidance, but what a lot of people call feedback. So you're responsible for creating a culture of open communication and feedback. And the second thing that you are responsible for is building a cohesive team, a team in which everybody is taking a step in the direction of their dreams. And the third thing you're responsible for, of course, is achieving great results. And I say in the book that that telling people what to do doesn't work. You don't achieve great results by telling people what to do. You've got to figure out how to do it collaboratively.
Those are great points, and it makes, again, I think anybody who's been on the offside of a boss who doesn't do these things or just thinks that he or she is there to give orders is saying, wow, this person makes a lot of sense, and I wish they were my boss.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's not just in high tech that people have figured out that telling people what to do doesn't work. I remember my co-founder, Russ Laraway, and I were talking to somebody who heads up learning and development for New Jersey Transit. And when he was teaching new managers, the first thing he taught them was, don't tell people what to do. It's not going to work. They're not going to do what you say just because you're the boss.
Well, again, I think that seems to be from the enlightened bosses now. They're finding that out, that it works a little better that way. And we're getting more productivity, happier workers who show up more often rather than ones who just keep changing jobs. Now, let me ask you, though, isn't there another end to that? And let's use any employee that we might have. You start working closely with them, finding out a little bit more about their life, and you find out you really like them. Real good person. They're golfers, you're golfers. You root for the local team, they root for the local team. Is it harder to give them direction after that?
I don't think so. I believe, actually, the at the core of your job as a boss is to form relationships with each of the people who work directly for you. And the way that you form those relationships is not by endless dinners or schmoozing. The way you form those relationships is actually by fulfilling your 3 responsibilities. So the way that you give, get, and encourage feedback is the way you form relationships. The way you build the team and decide who to put in which roles, that's how you form your relationships. The way that you achieve results is how you form relationships. And I believe that you can't fulfill your responsibilities as a leader. You cannot offer great feedback. You cannot build a great team. You can't achieve great results if you don't have great relationships with each of the people who are reporting directly to you. Again, relationships don't scale. You can't have, if you're leading a 500-person company or a 10,000-person company, you can't have relationships with everyone, but you can have relationships with your direct reports. And those relationships are what move you forward as a manager. They're very much at the core. One of my favorite lines in the book is that power and control work really well in a baboon troop or a totalitarian regime. But hopefully that's not what you're shooting for, right? If you're kidding yourself if you think you can offer feedback to somebody who you don't have a relationship with.
Well, I have a relationship with my producer, and right now